Hello everyone, Viking Actual here, welcome back to the channel. I wanted to do another build video for you today, but I wanted to go down a little bit of a different route and deliver something somewhat different. So it will be a usual formatted build video, but the difference we're going with today is that today we are not doing a subclassed video. So for all those players out there that aren't too keen on the new update 46 or 47 which introduced subclassing, this is a build which is for you. For those that don't know what that means, it basically means that it is pure to the skill line. I've not taken skill lines from any of the other classes. We have stuck to just the 3 normal ones that are base game for that class. You can probably tell from the abilities down below that we are working with the Dragon Knight. The Dragon Knight is my baby. It is the one I play the most. You may see me sometimes playing on a few others. Certainly with the new updates, stealing some of the abilities and the class skill lines from some other classes, but most of the time I'm working on a DK. So this is a pure DK build. I'm going to quickly pop this so you can start, and we're going to have a look at the stats. So in terms of attribute points, I went for my normal stamina setup, so 50 into the stamina and then 14 into the health. This gives us a really nice health pool of just over 32,000 and a nice stamina pool of 23,000. You might be looking at 14,500 magicka and thinking that's quite low. When we get into it a little bit later, looking at some of the sustain of this set, is why we are able to get away with such a low magicka pool. So at the moment we've got 1,000 magicka recovery and 1,200 stamina recovery. The stamina one goes through the absolute roof with all the different things that we've got on. The magicka recovery increases by a considerable amount as well. We are not running out of resources on this. Out of all the builds that I've put up, this is the best to sustain. And that's a mix of the sets and then some of the abilities that we've put in as well. Over to the damage side, obviously the larger resource pools and the sustain mean that we can put out more damage. But raw stats are lower than my other ones. So all the other ones I've tried to keep to about 4,000 weapon and spell damage. This one is just a little bit shy of that, 3,800. We are not using a great sword. If we were, we would be at the 4,000 mark, but I've prioritised penetration and went with a maul, which is why our penetration base, before we take into account any of the buffs from our sets, is already 12,000. The average PvP player is running around with about 30,000, so you've already knocked out, the minute you go into a fight, 1/3 of their overall armour, which is huge. That's just base. That's what you're working with at a base. So really, really nice. We've then got medium in terms of our crit chance, 25% nearly. We're not heavily spec'd into critical damage. It's just there, one, because it's nice for some of our heals, because we do have a lot of heals. And then a mix of our sets and stuff, we do actually increase our critical damage reasonably high. So when we do hit crits, they are high. So the more we can, the better. But it's not something we've specifically spec'd into. And then we've got our resistances on the front bar at 21,000. It is a little bit lower, but obviously these do then go up with some of our abilities. And then most importantly, our crit resistance is at 2,500. That's due to some of our CPs and obviously impen. We are not running full impen because we want to try and keep the resistances as high as we possibly can. And then we are running the Lovamundus to help us with our penetration. This is an interesting one. We're using lycanthropy, so it will mean that we're taking more poison damage. We don't necessarily have to turn into a werewolf, but we can. There's just an interesting passive for being a werewolf that some people may not notice. So we've got that because it's on our back bar, and I'll explain a little bit later. And then as always, we're using the Jewels of Mistral just to keep those recoveries nice and high and to increase our max health by 4,000. Moving on to our skills. Obviously we don't need to go through the skill lines because we're a pure DK. We're starting off with Fiery Contingency. So deals 6,000 damage straight off the bat. You'll trigger this, it will sit there for a bit, and then on your next attack it will then burst. When it does, obviously 6,000 damage on top of whatever ability you've just used. So for example, if the Molten Whip's just procced and you've just done, I don't know, something up to 10,000 if you've managed to get your Seething Fury up, you've then got an extra 6,000 on top, so you're at 16,000 damage just straight away. So really, really nice. It's almost like an additional burst on a burst. It also gives you reduced damage taken by 8% for 7 seconds, so basically just shy of a major protection for 7 seconds, and then grants us major force for 21 seconds, increasing our critical damage by 10%. So that's really, really nice, and it's why we've somewhat spec'd into critical damage, in terms of we need that percentage chance to be slightly higher because we want to make the most of that. We then have our Molten Whip, the morph of Lava Whip. As you can see, at the moment it's only a 7,700 flame damage tooltip, but it increases because of the additional damage it gets from using other Ardent Flame abilities. So with every one we get, that damage will increase by 20%, stacking up to 3 times, and it also gives us 100 weapon and spell damage for 15 seconds for every Ardent Flame ability, stacking up to 3 times. So with all of our Seething Fury, because you're going to want to try and get all the stacks before you use this, you're easily going to be up to about 11,000. So what looks rather low now does increase, and it's also got the nice bonus that it's split between Magicka and Stamina, so it doesn't drain from any particular pool. Next, we've got the Dragon Knight Noxious Breath. This is really, really nice, especially with the new update, update 46, because it will apply the poison status effect in a cone in front of you for 10 meters. So in a cone, anything in front of you, 10 meters in front, is going to be given the poison status effect, which is going to be dealt as execute damage, as well as dealing just under 6,000 poison damage, and then 14,000 poison damage as a dot. And then obviously the additional bonus is that it applies Major Breach to them, which reduces their physical spell resistance by 6,000. So when you take that into account with the 12,000 we already got, hitting with this, 18,000 penetration. This is actually quite easy to spam because it's only 2,715, so you can just be constantly hitting them with this. You come onto a new target, a new group, spray all of them with this, and you're dealing 18,000 pen to them straight away. Really, really nice. Then we've got Venomous Claw. This you could easily swap to the other morph, because you're not really making the most of the initial hit being a poison stats effect, but we're not really spec'd too much into the dots. This is a bit of a hybrid build where there's a bit of crit, there's a bit of dots. So what we really want is actually the damage over time increase, dealing 12% more damage every 2 seconds. The longer it's in them, the more damage it deals, and obviously it lasts for 12 seconds. So 12 seconds for 24 seconds. So I mean, you can do the maths. 12 times 12, 144% extra damage. It's dealing a lot of damage and just constantly eating away at them, along with whatever damage you're then dealing with them. So really, really nice dot there, and again, super, super cheap, just over 2,000. This is our source of Major Brutality and Sorcery, increasing our weapon and spell damage. It also gives us that minor endurance. So while this is up for 40 seconds, we have increased stamina recovery by 15%. So I'll show you that in action when we get to looking at us all buffed up. But this is a really nice another source of stamina recovery. And then it also removes all snares and immobilizations, and it grants immunity to them for 4 seconds. So as an ability, not limited to any class, is actually really, really nice, because it does the job of something like Birds of Prey with the immobilization removal, and also increases our weapon and spell damage, and then also gives us recovery. So overall, all around, an amazing ability that only costs 2,520. So front bar, you have nothing over 3,000. So all really, really cheap, and then mixing that in with the high sustain, you're not running out. So you can hit this as much as you want. Any of these abilities you can hit as much as you want to deal that damage. We then go on to our ultimate. We're using the Ferocious Leap, which is the morph of Dragon Leap. You can easily go with the other morph if you just want to go solid damage, but the nice thing about this is the damage shield at the end, so it deals a little bit less damage, but the damage it does deal is flame damage. Now that's why we go for this morph and not the other one. If you subclass in something like Sorcerer, where you get increased physical damage, fantastic. But because we've went for a pure DK, we've got the Ardent Flame, which gives us 6% or 5% extra flame damage. We want to stick to flame damage because that's what we're kind of spec'd into. So we went with this one, and then we'll just take the added bonus that every time we proc it, for 6 seconds, we basically double our armor with a damage shield. So super, super nice. Moving on to our back bar, looking at the werewolf transformation morph. Now most people would slot this just because they want to turn into a werewolf. They've got a bit of a build that is purely for werewolf. This build can be used as a werewolf. There's enough in it that you can easily use, and one of our 5-piece armor sets works really, really well with werewolf. But if you scroll down, while slotted, your stamina recovery is increased by 15%. So you proc that, 15%. You slot that on our back bar, 30% stamina recovery. So not only is it great utility, because you can then turn into a werewolf, which increases obviously your stamina, and you do all this other stuff, you get a whole new set of abilities, but just by slotting it, you're getting a bonus. So even if you don't want to play like that, it's really, really nice. And I go for this one, instead of something like going for Reviving Barrier for the support passive of increasing magic recovery, because most of our abilities are stamina. The ones we're using all the time are stamina. So that's what I need to be spec'd into to make sure I can keep them constantly ticking over. We then have the same healing soul that we have in all of our builds. So heals for 10,000, refunds the cost by 600 and puts 600 stamina in the bank, and then gives us major vitality for 10 seconds, increasing our health and damage shields by 12%. Now I emphasise the damage shields because if you've procced this before this, extra 10% damage shield. And if you have this procced before another one of our abilities, there is an additional damage shield. So this, we may not have the highest resistances, but we do have frequent damage shields popping up. And if this is up, it then increases them. So just keep that in mind if you're looking at resistances thinking they're really, really low. We have ways of keeping us alive. We've got damage shields, and we're about to move on to some of our heals over time that are also keeping us alive constantly. So that is our main heal. This is our burst heal. We then have our first heal over time. So most people would use the Flames of Oblivion just for that extra damage. I find that because it's not targeted, it could go anywhere. If you're in a massive group of enemies, it may not even be hitting the enemy that you want it to hit. So I go with Cauterize because I know that it's guaranteed to heal me with one of the balls. If I'm in a group, fantastic, because it will heal them as well. But I know that I'm guaranteed that every 3 seconds I'm going to heal, once I'm all buffed up, by about 5,000. So every 3 seconds, a 5,000, it's a little burst heal, and that will go on for 15 seconds. So I get 5 bursts of 5,000 over 15 seconds. And for only 3,000, it's actually quite a cheap heal. Obviously we have it slotted as well because it gives us our major prophecy and it gives us our major savagery, which is also helping us with those critical ratings, both front and back bar, so helping with our critical heals and helping with our critical damage. So this is a really, really nice heal over time. We then have our Resolve and Vigor. Nearly the same price as this, another heal over time. I've spoken about it before. You'll struggle to find a PvP build that doesn't have this. This is obviously the main heal over time, where you're healing huge amounts over 5 seconds, and then obviously for 20 seconds you're getting that minor resolve, increasing your resistances. We then have our hard CC, so this is our crowd control, encasing an enemy, stunning them for 3 seconds, dealing flame damage, really spec'd into flame damage. If you're going to play a Dragon Knight, you want to be the absolute epitome of Dragon. Flame everything. So it deals flame damage and then heals you again. So there's 4 heals. You got your burst heal over time, but realistically it's every now and then little bursts. Heal over time over 5 seconds, but fast. And then every time you proc it, there's 10,000 health. So back bar, just loads of heals. If you proc this, you then proc these, and then you hit that one someone, you're always going back up to full health. Really, really good. But this is our hard CC, which we can then proc, and then swap to our front bar, and then just smash them while they basically can't do anything about it. We then have hardened armor. So this is only for 2,500. So a really, really cheap source of major resolve, increasing our resistances by 6,000. It also gives us a damage shield. So I said, really nice to have 12% extra damage shield for this. Really nice to have an extra 12% damage shield for this as well. Because you can proc these at the same time. You could put this on, 10,000, put that on, 33,000. You've now got 40,000, over 40,000 damage shield. It's going to take ages. Well, it's either they're going to have to wait until it's dispersed after 6 seconds, or they're going to take ages chipping away at you before they even touch your health. So really, really nice. And then obviously while it's active, it's dealing damage back as flame damage again to anyone that hits you with a direct damage attack within melee range. So it's another dot. So really, really nice ability, super cheap. You'll probably heard it before, but some people would rather use this than this, because this obviously costs 4,000. It's a nice get out of jail free card, because you've essentially got 10,000 extra health for 6 seconds. Pop this, your health goes back up, and they can't touch you at the moment. There's one way of looking at it. So, an amazing ability. Some people give it some hate. I think it's just because of the skill line that it's in. I think between, well, the only good things in the skill line I think is probably this and this, and maybe talons, but it's a bit situational. And then that's basically the skills. In terms of our passives, obviously burning and poison status effect increased by 33%, and then when we apply them every 3 seconds, it will give us back magicka and stamina. So sustain, and then obviously increased damage, really specking into that burning. Dealing direct damage increases our damage done to that target. So with direct damage over time, obviously we've got 3 dots. We've got our hardened armor, we've got our noxious breath and our talon. We then have an increase to all of the dots, and then obviously increased flame damage and poison damage by 5%. So this affects nearly all of our abilities, from our hard CC to our ultimate to our general damage dealing abilities. So really, really nice. Obviously we've got increased block, healing, health recovery, and then a really nice one here, increasing our resistances. And then finally, increasing the duration of our abilities, so that includes our CC, restoring our resources when we use an ultimate for each ultimate spent. So this is another source of sustain, so every time that we use our ultimate we get resources back. Minor brutality. This is the only passive that will give you minor brutality. So not only do we get our major brutality from our forward momentum, this will give us an extra 10% on that. So our overall weapon and spell damage increases by 10% on top. Which then means that 3,800 will suddenly shoot up. So it isn't actually that low, it's just the base figures look low. And then if you're in combat, you also generate 3 ultimate. And then every time you cast, well, we only have one, every time you cast Shattering Rocks, you're restoring 1,120 stamina. So even more stamina sustain. The stamina sustain is amazing. Looking at our champion points, we won't worry too much about our green, but obviously you need to have Breakfall. You're not going into PvP without it, that's me telling you. If you do, you're going to end up breaking your legs, and someone's going to come along for easy pickings. You then have Rationer to increase the food and drink. Someone made a comment that I've got loads of potions. Just think of it that this is probably why, because every time I use it I have a 10% chance not to consume it. We know that that's not why I have so many, it's because I forget, but we'll pretend in this circumstance. We then have Steed's Blessing, just to help me get around, and then obviously, I won't worry about that one, but Gifted Rider to increase our mount speed. For green CPs, I've basically went not breaking legs, helping me with my pots and foods, and then obviously just mobility. And then for our blue CP, we've got increased single attack damage and direct damage. So that really does buff our whip. That's what we're relying on to deal with that burst damage, because everything else is dots to keep them low. In here, we're speccing this time into magical damage, because we want to go down the flame route. We have resilience for that critical resistance, because there's all those Nightblades or players that have subclassed in assassination, so crit damage is super high, so resistance to it is amazing. And then this time we went focused mending, which increases our healing done not only to other targets but to ourselves as well by 10%. So all of those heals in that back bar, they heal us. So that's 10%, all of them increased by 10%. You then take into account that we've got the Dragon Knight ability, there's 19%. You then take into account Major Vitality, if we prop that, there's another 12%, so you're already at 31%. 31% increased healing done, so really nice heals on this. Then moving to red CP, we've kept our fortified because we do want to keep our resistances up, although we do have obviously the damage shields, and we have the can't think of the word I'm thinking of. We have the damage shields and the heals over time. We then have Pain's Refuge to negate even more damage given to us, depending on how many negative effects we've got. And then Sustained by Suffering. So while we're under a negative effect, our health, magicka and stamina recovery shoot up by 150. Even more sustain. I told you at the beginning, guys, this build is sustain heavy. There's another layer of our sustain. So we've already got the sustain from the werewolf, from the forward momentum, from our food, and now this. And then finally, we have celerity. We've got no other buff to movement in this build. Dragon Knight does lack that, so you just have to keep that in mind if you're playing a pure Dragon Knight. So celerity is probably a good bet to go, so that you can move around quite fast. I've realised now we missed actually going through the sets. So to start off with, we have the Firebrand Maul. For our enchant, we went flame damage. Like I said, everything on this is flame damage. If you want to be a dragon, or play like a dragon, or like a Dovahkiin, or anything like that, this is the build for you, because everything is flame. We then went sharpened, because we want that penetration to be hitting 18,000 if we've managed to hit him with a major breach. We also get more penetration from the set, Pyrebrand increasing our penetration by 1500, and then 2 lots of 130 weapon and spell damage, and then our light attacks, which translates over to, no, because it won't be, it'll be our back bar, never mind. If you wanted to swap your bars and have the leap on your back bar and the wolf transformation on your front bar, your werewolf form will have on its light attacks, which already do a lot of damage, the flame damage, because whatever sets you are wearing carry over to your werewolf transformation. So that might be something you want to change in your build. Okay, we've got a bit of a defensive shield set, so while I'm on the same bar, I'll proc my major vitality and then hit it, and then I'll move this. But obviously that's a personal preference for you. But we've got Pyrebrand, really nice, another dot, and then obviously the heavy attack will get buffed by all of those other dots we've got by a huge amount. And then obviously DK has no execute, so this is our form of execute, dealing up to 260% more damage if they're below 33% health. Lots of talking there, I know, but this, if you're playing DK, make the most of Pyrebrand, because it is the only way you're going to play it. And then as a back bar, we have Wretched Vitality. This is our final layer of sustain. So the 2 and 3 piece gives us sustain to Magicka and Stamina. 4 piece to weapon and spell damage, so it means our heals will be even higher. And then when you're hit with a major buff, well, when you apply a major buff to yourself or an ally, or a debuff to an enemy with a duration, you get 260 Magicka and Stamina recovery for 15 seconds. And then if you apply a minor buff or debuff with a duration, you get to 130 for 15 seconds. Thinking back to our back bar, which is what this is on, that means that when we use our Vigor for minor resolve and our hardened armor for major resolve, both of these will then proc, which means that for 15 seconds our recoveries are increased by 390 on top of everything else. So with everything else, if you've got a negative effect, obviously then you take in sustained by suffering, you've taken into account your food, you might have forward momentum for an extra 15%. If you've used a pot, then you've got all of your major fortitude, your major, all of those sorts of things, major endurance. Your sustain is going to be epic. It is going to be amazing. You are not going to run out of resources on this build. Moving on to our monster set. If you're playing a Dragon Knight, you cannot be playing a Dragon Knight without your Bloodspawn. I think the only thing that you could potentially swap this for is Balog. But even then, we already have quite a lot of penetration. We can, we've got enough base penetration to carry us. Obviously that will then put us to 4,000, so maybe that is what you want. We've got the damage then and the penetration, and then even more penetration when we use these abilities, which then give us sustain. But I prefer reduced damage and ultimate generation so that I can keep popping ultimates. Not to mention, it also gives us more resistances. So in the end, this build is actually quite tanky. With all the heals over time, with all the damage shields, with all the resistance you end up gaining, it does actually get quite tanky. And then obviously we've got 1 piece of trainee for the extra health, and then everything else. Our mythic. Well, let me go through armor sets. So we've got reinforced heavy head, a reinforced heavy chest, and a reinforced heavy legs. Everything else is impen. We've got heavy feet, light hands, medium waist, medium shoulders. So 4 heavy, 3 medium, 1 light. So, and then 3 reinforced and the rest impen. We then have the Saint and the Seducer. Now, most people have forgotten about this now, but update 45, this was the mythic to be using. While in combat, you gain 1 of 5 random buffs. This will change every 10 seconds, and then enemies within 12 meters of you will gain 1 minor debuff. Now, they normally are linked, so if you're getting Major Berserk, they're getting Minor Maim. If you're getting Major Resolve, they're getting Minor Breach. So the buffs you can get is Berserk, Resolve, Force, Evasion, and Courage. The debuffs they can get is Maim, Breach, Brittle, Vulnerability, and Cowardice. For that reason, we don't have a source of Major Berserk, because every now and then we are getting that 10% increased damage. The Major Resolve is wasted on us, but the flip side of them getting Minor Breach isn't, because then with our Noxious Breath, we then are at 21,000 penetration for that duration. We also have Major Force there, mixing that with our Minor Force, 30% extra critical damage. Major Evasion is alright, but it's very niche, and I don't think it procs exactly when it needs to. But the Minor Vulnerability, them taking extra damage, is amazing. And then obviously Major Courage, increasing your weapon and spell damage by 400. So with everything else included, while it looks quite low, our weapon and spell damage can actually get quite high. Once we've procced everything, we've got the Major and Minor Brutality, we've got Major Courage, you might want to swap in Balog. You're looking at, 4,500 base and then increase. So really, really nice. And then obviously on all of these, as always, infused weapon and spell with stamina recovery. Last but not least, to show you all the stats buffed up, I'm going to actually swap so I can actually show you this out really quick, because then I can show you the actual true stats. So to look at resistances first, on our back bar, 33,000 for both, so really nice, pretty solid resistances. And then on our front bar, 30,000. So even when you're on your front bar, you're not actually that squishy. Keep in mind that obviously when Bloodspawn kicks off, that this will then be 33,000 and 36,000 irrespectively. So that's why we've got it on there, because it will boost up those numbers really, really nicely. Obviously with the Werewolf, stamina recovery goes up to 1,400. I'm not in combat, so I can't show you the Wretched Vitality proc. But obviously if we've got 1,400 on there, if I proc that, it's now 1,600. You then put another, 390 on there, you're nearly at 2,000 stamina recovery. And we haven't used any pots to then increase that by even more. So really, really nice recoveries. If we put this down, and this down, and then go to our front bar, you can then see we're just under 5,000 weapon damage. So we are not lacking in the weapon department, even though it looks like we would. And obviously we've talked about ways that you could then increase that if you really, really wanted. So then all buffed up. Let's proc that as well. And go to the front bar. That is what you're kind of looking at working with when you go into an actual fight. Obviously that's 14, but that will then go up more with the Major Force, so up to 34, which with the base would make that 84. So 84% critical damage compared to what you're normally doing. And I'll give you a quick example of what the tooltip is. I can't show you with the Seething Fury because I'm not in combat. Where is it? Skills. I'll show you the quick. So 10,000 basically. Once you then increase that by 60%, you're easily over 10,000. And then obviously if that crits by 80% as well, so if you hit a crit on this, they're gone. So that is what you're going to be aiming for, getting 3 stacks of Seeding Theory with all your buffs up, and then using this. And that is essentially the build. I hope you've enjoyed, and if you have, please like and subscribe. Really appreciate it, and I will catch you in the next one.